In the quiet streets of London, where lamps glowed dimly against the fog and the city seemed to hold its breath after dusk, a single wrong knock changed 2 lives forever. It was 10:47 p.m., an hour when most respectable households were winding down. The sound echoed against the wooden door of a modest apartment, sharp and uninvited, pulling Ethan Carter away from his solitude. Ethan was not a man of surprises. A scholar by profession and a recluse by temperament, he lived a life measured by books, quiet routines, and the occasional letter from distant friends. But that night, when he opened the door, he was not greeted by a neighbor, nor by the familiar face of his landlord. Instead, he stood frozen before a woman whose very presence seemed out of place, her breath quick, her eyes alert, and her figure tense as though she had been running from something unseen. Her name was Amelia, though Ethan would not know that for several minutes more. At that moment, she was simply a stranger with an urgent look, a stranger who had mistaken his door for another. But destiny has a way of weaving mistakes into turning points. Amelia had meant to knock on the apartment across the hall, yet here she was, standing in front of Ethan Carter, a man she had never met, yet whose life would soon intertwine with hers in ways neither could have imagined. A woman with shadows in her eyes, Amelia was unlike anyone Ethan had ever encountered. Born in the countryside of northern England, she carried with her the resilience of someone who had learned to survive disappointment and betrayal. Her childhood had been marked by loss, and though her beauty was undeniable, it was her strength, not her features, that drew attention. She had a way of standing tall, even when her voice trembled, a way of looking at the world as if she refused to be conquered by it. In London, Amelia had carved a modest existence for herself, balancing part-time work with aspirations of something greater. She had come from hardship, but she had not let hardship define her. And though she did not know it, her knock that night had not just disturbed Ethan's evening, it had disturbed the stillness of his heart, which had long been silent. The scholar's quiet world, Ethan Carter, was in many ways Amelia's opposite. A man of letters, his world revolved around dusty libraries and quiet study halls. He was respected among his peers for his knowledge of history and literature, but beyond the walls of academia, he was a ghost. He had few friends, fewer visitors, and no one to share his evenings with. Loneliness had not just crept into his life, it had settled there, like ivy wrapping around the stones of an abandoned house. When Amelia knocked on his door that night, Ethan expected nothing more than to redirect her to the correct apartment. But instead, something in her voice, the mix of urgency and vulnerability, caused him to hesitate. He invited her inside, offering tea as any polite Englishman might. Yet beneath the politeness was curiosity, even a stirring of something he had long suppressed. The simple, human desire for connection. Coffee and confessions. The following day, Amelia insisted on making amends for the intrusion. She suggested coffee at a nearby cafe, a small place tucked into a corner street, where the aroma of roasted beans seemed to hang eternally in the air. Ethan agreed, though he rarely accepted such invitations. What began as polite conversation quickly turned into something far deeper. Amelia spoke with disarming honesty, and Ethan found himself listening in a way he had not listened to anyone for years. She spoke of her struggles, her difficult family, her dreams of building a better life, her fear of repeating the mistakes of her past. And in return, Ethan opened up about his own loneliness, his sense of irrelevance despite his academic achievements, and his quiet longing for something more than books and empty evenings. The cafe became their sanctuary. Week after week, they returned to that same table by the window, sharing thoughts, stories, and confessions. For Amelia, Ethan became a safe harbor, someone who listened without judgment. For Ethan, Amelia was the spark he had been missing, the proof that life could still hold unexpected joys, the guardian's warning. But every story of love has its obstacles, and theirs came in the form of Gladys, Amelia's godfather. A stern man with old-fashioned values, Gladys had raised Amelia after her parents' deaths. To him, Amelia was still the little girl he had once protected, and he viewed Ethan with suspicion. A solitary scholar with little wealth and few social ties seemed an unsuitable match for the woman he regarded as his ward. Gladys confronted Ethan one evening, his words blunt and uncompromising. He warned Ethan not to involve Amelia in a life of obscurity, not to steal from her the opportunities she deserved. His words cut deep, for Ethan himself feared the same, that he was not enough, that his world was too small for a woman as vibrant as Amelia. But Amelia, upon hearing of the confrontation, stood firm. She reminded her godfather that her life was her own, and that happiness could not be measured in status or wealth. "He listens," she told Gladys simply. "He sees me for who I am." And though Gladys did not approve, he could not deny the strength in Amelia's conviction. Wisdom from a friend in Ethan's darkest moments of doubt. It was Harry, an old friend from his university days, who offered counsel. Harry was everything Ethan was not: outgoing, confident, comfortable in the bustle of life. Yet he valued Ethan's quiet intellect and respected his sincerity. When Ethan confided his fears about Amelia, Harry placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Don't let fear write your story for you," Harry said. "If she has chosen you, it's because she sees something you cannot see in yourself. Don't run from that. Rise to it." Those words stayed with Ethan, echoing in his mind whenever doubt threatened to overwhelm him. A love tested. Despite the warnings, despite the whispers of society, and the doubts in their own hearts, Ethan and Amelia's bond grew stronger. They faced the small struggles of life together: financial uncertainty, Amelia's lingering fears of failure, Ethan's battles with self-worth. Yet in facing these struggles side by side, they found something unshakable. Their love was not built on illusion, but on the daily choice to remain together. Still, fate was not finished testing them. An opportunity arose for Amelia, an invitation to Pennsylvania, where a new life, a new career, and the promise of stability awaited. It was everything she had once dreamed of, yet it meant leaving Ethan behind. The decision tore at her, for it forced her to choose between ambition and love, between the path she had envisioned and the man she had come to need. The crossroads, the night before her departure, Amelia and Ethan sat once more in their familiar cafe. The world outside bustled with life, but inside, time seemed to slow. Words failed them at first. They simply sat, hands entwined across the table, their silence heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Amelia whispered, "I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose us." Ethan, with tears in his eyes, replied, "Then don't. Wherever you go, whatever you do, don't let go of what we've built." It was not a plea, but a promise that their love, born of a wrong knock, could survive distance and time. When Amelia boarded the ship bound for Pennsylvania, the London sky was heavy with rain. Ethan stood on the docks, coat pulled tightly around him, watching her silhouette grow smaller with every step. The decision had been hers to make, but the ache of separation was shared by them both. He wanted to call out, to tell her to stay, but he knew that love without freedom was no love at all. So he let her go, silently praying that the ocean would not drown what they had built together. Letters across an ocean. The days that followed were the hardest Ethan had ever known. His apartment, once warmed by Amelia's laughter, felt colder than ever. To ease the loneliness, he threw himself into his work, writing late into the night. But no matter how many books surrounded him, no matter how many hours he buried in research, nothing could fill the void she had left. Their letters became lifelines. Each week, Amelia's words crossed the ocean, carrying with them the warmth of her voice. She wrote of her new life in Pennsylvania, the bustling streets, the opportunities, the challenges of being in a foreign land. She admitted her fears, her loneliness, her longing for his presence beside her, and Ethan in turn poured his soul into his replies. He wrote of his daily struggles, of Gladys's continued disapproval, of Harry's constant encouragement. He reminded her, again and again, that distance could not diminish what they shared. But letters, no matter how heartfelt, could not replace touch. They could not replace the comfort of a hand held across a cafe table, or the solace of silence shared in the same room. Weeks turned to months, and the strain of distance tested their bond. Doubt whispered at the edges of their minds. Was love strong enough to survive oceans and years, or was it destined to fade, like ink on paper over time. The weight of temptation. In Pennsylvania, Amelia was presented with choices she had never imagined. Admirers gathered quickly around her, men of means and ambition who saw in her both beauty and resilience. They offered her stability, comfort, and the chance to escape the hardships of uncertainty. For a time, she wondered if perhaps her godfather had been right, that Ethan, with his quiet life and meager means, could not give her the future she deserved. Yet whenever such doubts rose, she would remember that first evening in his apartment, the warmth of his hesitant smile, the way he had listened as though her words carried weight, and she realized that what Ethan gave her was worth more than any material promise. He gave her truth. He gave her himself, unpolished, unpretending, unafraid to share his weaknesses. That, she knew, was rarer than gold. A scholar without his anchor back in London, Ethan wrestled with his own demons. Without Amelia, his doubts grew louder. Gladys's words echoed in his mind, that Amelia deserved more, that she was wasting her future on him. There were days when Ethan nearly believed it. He considered ending it, sparing her the burden of loving a man who could not stand proudly among the world's great. But Harry, ever his voice of reason, reminded him of what truly mattered. "You think she crossed the ocean to leave you behind?" Harry said one evening. "No, Ethan. She crossed it to fight for both of you. Don't you dare surrender before the battle's even done." Harry's blunt wisdom steadied Ethan, giving him courage to hold on when despair threatened to consume him. The return 2 years passed before Amelia returned to London. She stepped off the ship with a mixture of anticipation and fear, uncertain of what she would find. Would Ethan still be waiting? Would he still love her with the same quiet devotion, or had time and loneliness eroded their bond? When she knocked on his door once again, this time intentionally, it was not 10:47 p.m. but early morning. Ethan answered, disheveled from a night of restless sleep, his eyes widening at the sight of her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Amelia whispered, "I came back, not because I failed there, but because my heart never left here." Ethan's reply was simple. He stepped aside, letting her in, just as he had on the night they met. But this time she was not a stranger. She was home, rebuilding together. Their reunion was not a fairy tale. Life, with all its practicalities, still demanded sacrifice. Money was scarce, work was uncertain, and Gladys remained unconvinced of Ethan's worth. Yet Amelia and Ethan faced these challenges with a renewed determination. They knew what it meant to lose each other, and they were unwilling to repeat the mistake. Slowly, they built a shared life. Amelia found work that suited her skills, while Ethan's scholarship earned him modest recognition. They rented a small flat together, filling it with books, laughter, and the kind of love that grows stronger through trial. For every moment of doubt, there was a moment of reassurance, a hand held tightly, a whispered promise, a glance that spoke louder than words. The cafe. Once more years later, on a quiet autumn evening, Amelia and Ethan returned to the cafe where their story had first unfolded. The same aroma of roasted beans lingered in the air. The same table by the window awaited them. Time had etched lines on their faces, but their eyes held the same light. As they sipped their coffee, Ethan reached across the table, taking Amelia's hand in his. "Do you ever think," he asked softly, "what would have happened if you hadn't knocked on the wrong door?" Amelia smiled, her eyes glistening. "I think about it every day, and I thank God I did." They sat in silence then, not because there was nothing left to say, but because they no longer needed words. The world outside bustled as it always had, but within that little cafe, time seemed to pause, just as it had years ago. Two souls brought together by chance had chosen again and again to remain together. And that choice had made all the difference. The lesson of a wrong knock. Their story, though personal, carried a universal truth. Life is filled with wrong turns, mistaken choices, and knocks on doors never meant to be opened. Yet sometimes, those mistakes lead us to exactly where we need to be. For Ethan and Amelia, one wrong knock opened the door to a love that defied distance, doubt, and despair. It proved that true love is not about perfection, but about perseverance. Not about ease, but about endurance. As their story closed, one could not help but wonder how many such moments pass unnoticed in the lives of others. How many wrong knocks go unanswered. How many chances at connection are missed. Their tale reminds us to remain open, to listen, to welcome the unexpected. For sometimes the greatest stories of our lives begin not with certainty, but with accident. Closing for YouTube, and so ends the story of Amelia and Ethan. A love born from a mistake. Tested by distance, strengthened by choice, and sealed by time. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. More tales of history, chance, and love await. Who knows? The next knock at your door might just change your life forever.